Malolele, and we welcome everyone to another episode of the Polynesian Eyes podcast. You have Tevita Fale here from South Central Texas, and we have the founder of the Polynesian Eyes Foundation, Tevita Fale, all the way from Hawaii. How are you doing, Dad? And how are things going in Hawaii?
Everything is fine but me.
What's wrong?
When you get old, you start to forget things.
Oh, man, at least you're forgetting then. Me, I'm already forgetting right now, so there's no hope for me when I get older. I know you've been traveling a lot. I think you've been to Tonga, New Zealand, Hawaii. You even came to Texas since our last program, so you've been a busy guy.
Yeah, that's all you do when you get old. You just waste your time.
Hey, I know the grandkids and the kids love it. It's a great way to waste your time is to come spend time with the family. So that's a good thing, I think. So we're really appreciative of your time, Dad. I know there's a lot going on and with the traveling, but we have been discussing about our next series of interviews with you, and we really wanted to kind of roll it back to the beginning. A lot of your work has been around the Tu'i Tonga settlements. And so we did want to have a conversation and start the discussion on the different settlements and start a series that covers those settlements and really just to kind of give an overview. Just kind of discuss, Dad, what work you've done. I'll just pull this up on the side so viewers can see. Just kind of give a summary of the work you've done throughout the years in regards to the Tangaloa and Maui and the Taula locations, and then also the Tu'i Tonga settlements, so people kind of have an understanding of what you've spent your life studying and researching.
Our people know in our oral history, but foreigners didn't use our local oral history because our people not talk about we are around more than 3,000 years in Tonga
as a civilization.
And we are the head of Polynesia, and the Kingdom of Tonga used to be the triangle of Polynesia. That's Tongan's kingdom.
When you say the triangle, what do you mean by that?
From Tonga, Hawaii, all the way up.
Oh, before New Zealand was settled by the Polynesians.
Yeah.
The most southern point, the triangle ended at Tongatapu.
Yeah.
Okay.
And New Zealand, that's the name, Aotearoa. They know the Maui's map. He drew the map of Polynesia. Mm-hmm. And Aotearoa, that's the old name for New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Maui's map, they have in our map that's Aotea and Aotearoa. That's a two
constellations
name in the map.
Mm-hmm.
And out there, that's the Big Island, and Aotearoa, that's New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
And they said we came from Waihi, the far away land. And Waihi, that's America today. A German make a mistake, and he used the two words from his theory in 1930s, and he used the two names from the European names history, and he used it as Austronesian language.
Yeah.
And in 1952, that's when they first discovered the clay pot. And they said Lapita,
Yeah.
clay pot. But there were no Lapita or Austronesian in anywhere in Polynesia.
Yeah, those are Western ideas of our origin, right? Not they didn't want to listen to Polynesians when they said where we come from. And so that is, in speaking of Waihi, we're primarily referring to, and we'll talk a little bit about it. We're talking about Tangaloa, Maui, and the Taula, and we'll touch on that a little bit. But you have listed here on your website on this map 6 settlements of the Tu'i Tonga.
Yeah.
You want to just give a summary of each one, and then after that we'll dive into Tangaloa and Maui in detail. But just so that everyone gets a general idea of the different settlements. So this area right here, sorry, I'm on the wrong screen. This area right here is Tapuhia, and that's where Tangaloa lived, specifically right there.
Yeah, in the middle.
In the middle, you had the Taula who lived to the west, and then you had Maui who lived to the east in Lalofonua. What is this number 1 right here? This first settlement?
That's Tonga.
That's Tonga.
And when they move, and they move it to second settlement.
Yeah, over here.
They call it Tarikitonga.
Okay. So the first settlement, Tonga, that's where Aho'eitu made his first settlement, right? That's where he, when he came down, became the Tu'i Tonga. He did not stay in Tapuhia. His first settlement was Tonga. And then when they went to number 2, they called it Tarikitonga. And then and then I believe they changed the name of Tonga to, what is it, Tukutonga?
Yeah, Tukutonga, the number 1, when they move.
When they move.
Tarikitonga, that's the number 2, that is wait for Tonga.
Yeah.
And number 3, that's Toloa.
That's Toloa. Okay.
Yeah. And 6 Tu'i Tonga live in Toloa, and they have a title over there, still use it today in Perehake area. That's number 3 is they have a title over there, Tu'iono.
Tu'iono?
That's the 6.
The 6 kings that were there?
King live over there.
Okay. And this is where I do want to, just so for our other viewers, this is where in this Toloa area is where they did that study, and they found that there was urbanization in this area, and that this settlement was about 600 to 700 years older than what they had initially thought. But just want to throw that in there. But that's in the Toloa area. That's where Tupou College is right now, in that area, and that's where Tupou College gets that name Toloa from.
And the title Tu'iono, because 6 Tu'i Tonga live there, and they have it in Perehake now. They have that name. That
title. So they went from Toloa to number 4 here in the corner. Is this, looks like in New Toa area where the Hamonga is?
That's where the Hamonga is.
Okay. And so this is where the Tu'i Ta Tui, and is it Momo? Who are the main Tu'i Tongas in this area?
That's where Tui Ta Tui, and his father moved from Toloa.
Yeah. So it was Tu'i Ta Tui's father who moved from Toloa to, is it Heketa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they moved from there to number 5. That's only 2 Tu'i Tonga. Big thing over there, they have over there, name his pillow.
His kari, his pillow?
For his son. Oh, Talatama didn't have a son.
Mm-hmm.
And Talaiha Pepe moved from number 5 to number 6.
And that's in Mua Lapaha area. This is where the last settlement is to today.
It was 28 Tui Tonga live in Mua. And when the Europeans start to come, they are in Mua.
So that's a great overview. I mean, and what kind of work did you do, Dad, to kind of, find out the names of the Tu'i Tongas, how many live there? What kind of research and work did it take you to identify the settlements and so forth? How were you able to do that?
The name, it was a title name called Whihoko Nahau.
Mm-hmm.
Whihoko Nahau, the meaning of Whihoko Nahau, at Tu'i Tonga, they use his name where he lived at. That's what I follow. That's how I trace it.
So basically, I mean, that's still a practice that happens to this day, right? Whenever there's an important person or an important event, Polynesians name that place after that person or that event. So that was a big driver. So where did you get a lot of this oral history from, and how did you obtain it, get those names to track them? Did you go to the academics to get this information? Where did you go to get this information from?
Growing up in Mua,
Mm-hmm.
I was named after my grandfather. And he was a well-known name in Mua, in our family.
Mm-hmm.
The old capital of Tonga. That's what I get when I grow up in the 50s, going to the grade school. That's where all the story, when I grow up. They talk about it, our history. That's something the academics never know it. But every Sunday, the old folks, when they have a kava before church, they ask me to come over and save their kava. And after church, they have another kava before they go home. But I like it because I love to listen to all the stories from the old folks.
The old folks.
Yeah.
I have a quick question, because one of our most recent lives that we did with Mr. Aotearoa Masi, we did a review of a study about oral history, and that there's different kinds of oral history. Some oral history people make up just to challenge other people in a land that they have. Sometimes people just make up stories for entertainment. So there's good oral history and there's bad oral history, and I think a lot of it depends on the source, right? The source of the oral history. What made the old folks that you hung out with and heard from different from the old folks that are sitting somewhere else, and other people hearing stories from them? What made your experience rare or unique? What kind of people, what did they have access to that other people who share oral history didn't have?
Because our history was from mouth to mouth.
Mm-hmm.
The old guys, I got stories from them. They hear from their family, older folks before them. That's how we have our history. Record, it was not written, but it was from mouth to ear and mouth to ear. That's how we have our history. And the second settlement, they used to call this area where they have it, Tu'i Tapu.
Like shoreline or liku, like the ocean.
Because they used to call this area Tu'i Tapu before they moved to Toloa.
No, and I guess I think it's important for the people to understand that why the stories that you heard or the people that you heard stories from are different from other people. What kind of people were these older people? Because especially when we talk to people from Ha'amoa or even other people, academics who say they have an oral history that they listen to, I think it's really important to understand the difference between the oral history that you had access to and the people and the families, right? These are what made these families unique. Was it their title? Was it their location in Mua? Just to kind of help the viewers understand that you're not just talking about oral history of guys sitting around and talking about fun ideas that they heard or stories from random people. Who were these people that gave you this oral history? What made their oral history different from others?
Because, Mua is the capital of Tonga for so many years. And that Mua was capital of Tonga longer than anywhere else.
Out of all the 6 settlements, yes.
Yes.
The capital in Mua is by far the longest and the one that has the most ruins, right? Because they were there so long.
Yeah, 28 Tu'i Tonga.
Mm-hmm.
Look over here, there's only 1 Tu'i Tonga, 2 Tu'i Tonga, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
They don't live in any place like when they live in Mua, a capital for until the foreigners come to Palani.
Okay. So really, these people that you are talking to, these are people whose families and ancestors were involved in leading and guiding the empire for thousands of years, right? These are families that have had, firsthand. We're not talking about they heard a story of something that happened somewhere. This is stuff that happened firsthand with their ancestors. And that's what makes this really unique, is the opportunity you had to hear from them, because they had the direct knowledge of firsthand experience oral history.
Yeah, that's the difference. Today, a lot of people make up stories by themselves. They never get it from someone who was known before.
Yeah. Okay.
And you remember that Tu'i Tonga, 28 king of Tu'i Tonga live in Mua.
Yeah. We did one of the studies that we reviewed had 2 really interesting things. First, the capital in Mua is the most diversified location in all of Polynesia, where they found different kind of rocks from all over Polynesia: Eastern Polynesia, Melanesia, Micronesia, and in Ha'amoa. They don't find that anywhere else in Polynesia, right? That's the only place in all of Polynesia that you can find that variety of stone. The other one that they found very interesting, and maybe you could give some more context to this, that is the amount of titles in Mua was something that someone did a study, is there are so many titles, so many people in titles that are either directly related to, or started from Mua. The study says that when the more titles you have, that is a sign of concentrated power, right? So where there's more power, there's more titles. And they found that in Mua, there are more titles concentrated in a small space than anywhere else in Polynesia, which once again goes back to what we're talking about, is further evidence that Mua was the center of the Polynesian Empire, and that's where a lot of power was centered, and therefore you have so many titles in such a small area.
Yeah, and that's something interesting. I heard it on the TV. Israel is 3,000 years, and Tonga is more than 3,000 years. Let's see how old Tonga is.
And what makes it interesting is over those 3,500 years, always been independent, even to this day. I think that says a lot.
That's the longest kingdom in the whole world today.
Yeah, that means something. That means something. I want to dive into, because we talked about this first area, we're going to talk first about Tangaloa. you want to kind of give a quick description of Tangaloa, and then I'll pull up that picture that you wanted. But who is Tangaloa? What did he do? And why did Tangaloa come to Tonga Tapu? And then while you're explaining that, I will pull up a picture in the background.
It's kind of interesting when you look at the Mayan in Waihi, and they always talk about Waihi.
Yeah.
Where we come from. And Waihi is a faraway land. And they name many places all over in Polynesia to Waihi. The picture from the Mayan from Waihi, that's America. Look at the tongue. The tongue is out. That's what Tangaloa meaning of the first Tu'i of Tonga. The Tangaloa, and all these years before, in our history, wrote it is 950 AD, the last Tangaloa he has his son, Tui Tonga, the first Tui Tonga.
Mm-hmm.
The Mayan in Waihi, the meaning of Tangaloa over there is their oral history. The same thing meaning in our language, the tala tuk whakaholo, the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the Tangaloa, and Maui's name is Maya.
That's where Maui comes from, is a Mayan term.
And the other name is Loau. There's a 3 title in the Tongan history come from Waihi. Loau, Maui, and Tangaloa. Loau, that's the meaning of Loau, the end, Loau. Mm-hmm. And the name of Loau's home all over in Tonga, where Loau lived, his name was Ha'amea.
Ha'amea.
Ha'amea means the red ants.
Mm.
And you know all the red ants, they build mountain.
Yeah.
And that mound builder come from Waihi to Tonga. Tangaloa and Loau and Maui came to Tonga with the mound builder from Waihi.
And that is the foundation by which the Polynesian Empire was built, right? Yeah. You have that pre-existing culture, technology, religion that when Tangaloa, Maui, the Loaus, and also of the Taula, those were the founding fathers, so to speak, of the Polynesian Empire that allowed the empire to be built on.
Yeah, and that God who led them to Tonga is Hikureo, the voice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of funny when in 1797, when the Christian missionary came with a new religion, they call, and the Tongan called the old religion Mua, the area religion. And they call the Christian religion the Lotumui.
Mm-hmm.
Later, the area religion, Lotu, and Lotumui, the new religion.
The term Loau is recognized throughout Polynesia. I mean, even in Ha'amoa, they have Loau. They even have Loau titles today, even in Ha'amoa. But do you want to talk a little bit about the different types of Loau? Like you have first here is the Loau Fusifonua, which is the Maui clan, right?
Yeah.
So is Loau as you said, it's the ant builder. That's the primary civilization, the mound builders. Is Loau basically like a special knowledge or responsibility that each family had? Because you have it listed here from your research that there's the Loau Fusifonua, that was the Maui clan, right? The Loau Tufunga Fonua, the Tangaloa clan, the Loau Puke Fonua,
that's the Wharefa. That's Loau, they are the mound builder.
Mm.
That's Loau. And they built mound. When the Tangaloa king and the Tu'i Tonga and Maui, all these tribes,
Mm-hmm.
our people, when someone died, the Loau, they are the one handle all these things. And the name they have when they have a putu, a funeral for the king or any people in Tonga, they call them Nimatapu or
Mm-hmm.
Hatufunga. All the way for 1,000 years, they still use that name, Hatufunga and Nimatapu, sacred hand. When they build a mound, that's why they call it Tatufunga, they build mound. And when someone died, they call them Nimatapu. That's their job.
The whole civilization was called Loau, but it was, the Maui clan primarily went by Maui, the Tangaloa clan primarily went by Tangaloa, but it was the Loau Pukepuke Fonua clan that kept the name Loau, and the other clans used other names, but they're all different types of Loau. If I'm looking at this list that you
It
put
shows
in.
over there how important are you, the Loau. And they have a different job, make them the different in a particular time. Loau tribes, they are the one, you know how important when a king died,
Yeah.
or noble, or anybody all the way up to the Mea Vale. The people there, the working, Mea Vale is the people, they don't have any title.
Mm.
And when someone is very important and something, they call it Loau, because how
A
special that
specific
person.
task and knowledge. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually something, now that we're having this conversation, that whenever we look at civilizations or people who are in power or families that are in power, the most critical time is when a king dies, right? That's when a kingdom or empire is at the highest risk. You look at Alexander the Great, once he died, right, everything fell apart. So I think it's really important for the listeners and the viewers, as we talk about these Loau, and I think it's a very appropriate name, Puke Puke Fonua, right? And these are the guys that are handling the death, the Nimatapu and all these things. This is when the empire is at its weakest. And there is a specific, it looks to me, and you can correct me if you see things otherwise, but this is a very important, this is why each of the Loau and their responsibilities was important. And now that we're highlighting the Farefa and that Loau, that's what gave the stability to the Tu'i Tonga Empire for thousands of years, and the Tangaloa Empire, because there were people assigned to do specific tasks at specific times, and that level of organization is what allows stability. If you don't have that, you wouldn't have an independent Tonga to this day. You wouldn't have a Polynesian empire survive to this day if you didn't have that level of structure. And it sounds to me, from what you're explaining, the Loau structure is what facilitated that stability and that organization.
And anything they have a kava seko.
Mm.
And a kava seko also call it Loau.
Yeah.
The Whai kava.
The Loau structure, from your perspective, is the different knowledges, the different types of knowledge, the different types of families and groups and tasks that they're assigned to, and they all have their role, they all have their place, and the area that brings everyone together to put them in their places and in their roles is the kava circle. And that's how the more we talk about the kava circle, the more sophisticated it is, right? We say it's a representation of the heavens, but it's also a representation of the social structure of the Loau and how the empire was managed and governed on a day-to-day basis, is kind of what I'm understanding.
And you see how long, it doesn't matter who is dead. When a person dead, a commoner even have the kava and they have a nimatapu when a person died.
Yeah.
Not only for the king or nobles. Anybody died, they always
have that. Very interesting. So I think this picture, just so the viewers understand that this is where you find mound builders all around the world. The different types of civilizations that built mounds. I think that's what this picture is. But the one I did want to show for sure is this is a screenshot of a survey they did on Tonga Tapu and found over 10,000 man-made mounds throughout Tonga Tapu. So this is the building, the Loau building of mounds was on a massive scale. Like you said, it wasn't just for the Tu'i Tonga and his family. It sounds like this was for anyone who was of importance or had a role in society. They were building mounds, and it's found throughout Tonga Tapu and all the other islands too. Yeah,
they live on it, and when they die, they bury on the mound.
Yes,
and you see how important Tonga is.
And I think it's really important. I mean, I know some of the people who listen to us, they say, "Oh, why you guys always talk about Tonga? You guys are so prideful. You guys, you trying to be dividing." We're not trying to be dividing. What we're trying to do is, where's the truth? We just want to know the truth, right? Because we hear people from Ha'amoa, they say, we're the center of the empire. We even now hear people from like Tapu Tapu Atea and like Tahiti and those places where they say, no, we were the center. The head of the octopus was in Eastern Polynesia. We're just trying to have a conversation to understand, where's the truth? We cannot all be true, right? And how can we say we are one people if we can't even agree where we come from? We can't fully agree where the capital was. We all agree that there was a Polynesian empire, but we can't seem to agree on those things. But just wanted to kind of mention that. But any thoughts along that idea?
I remember one program you asked me why I think Tonga was different.
Mm-hmm.
It's different because Maui, Tangaloa, and Loau, they were, why they come to Tonga in the beginning. And you see, their god Hikureo brought them all the way up to Tonga. And Tonga is the only different. Tonga Tapuans mean sacred of the South. But when they have their get-together from hundreds of years, they come to Tonga. They all know where the head of Polynesia.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point because there's a lot of people who say, if you believe that Tangaloa and Maui came from America, why would they go past all the other islands and come specifically to Tonga Tapu? Well, that's the answer. It's because Hikuleo told them, don't stop here, don't stop there, go to here. This is the place I need you to be. No different than Israel. Israel wandered for 40 years in the desert. Went here, went there, went everywhere, but God said, no, you're not going to settle here. This is the place you'll be. So that I think is the answer as to why they didn't stop anywhere else is because Hikuleo said, don't stop here, keep going. And so that's where I think it's important that the name Ata, I think you said, is what's the meaning of the term Ata? Because Ata is just south of Tonga Tapu, and that's where they first landed. What's the meaning of Ata?
It's meant first.
First landing or first place?
Yeah, when the new day come, Ata, that's when
Oh, Ata. Okay. Ata La'a, like you can see, that's a sunrise. It's the
you have
new
the
place.
break before they come to Tongatapu.
And then Hokula is where they first landed on Tongatapu. And what does Hokula mean?
Hokula, that's Sorula in the Mayan. It means a peaceful place.
A peaceful place.
Solula in the Mayan and Hokula in the Tongan.
In Tongan. Okay.
And they name different things and they have stars named Hokula. Eh? The place where they have the gate of the sun, astronomy.
In Lolo
Only
Fonua.
one in Tonga and one in South America, the gate of the sun.
Well, and there's a funny story about this, and I think we mentioned it in one of our podcasts, because there are some people from Polynesia who try to say that they try to say, oh, the Hamonga was so important to Tangaloa, and Tangaloa lived in Manua and all these stuff, and then they said there's the Hamonga in the sky, and then they tried to say, so I asked a question online to them. I said, if Tangaloa lived and Maui lived in Manua, in Ha'amoa, then why did they build the Hamonga Maui in Tonga? Right? Like, I mean, and this is a simple question, right? Maybe they have a good answer somewhere, but nobody's given me a good answer, right? If Maui resided and Tangaloa resided somewhere else, but why did they build it on Tongatapu, right? Why is it that the Langis and the Hamonga are built on Tongatapu, and then they try to tell us that the Alotolu, they said, oh, the Tongan astronomy didn't even call the Ha'amonga. That was only Ha'amoa that did that. And they reference, and this comes back to why we appreciate the missionaries, we appreciate the academics for what they do, but they have some core weaknesses in the history that they record. The people in Ha'amoa shared with me that there was a missionary who was on their way to Fiji, stopped in Tonga, and asked them, what do you call the Ha'amonga in the sky? And whoever they asked told them that it's called Alotolu, right?
Yeah.
But Alotolu is the part of the Toloa that's inside the Hamonga, but it's not the Hamonga itself. So off of that one written account, people have assumed that the Tongan astronomers or Maui called the Hamonga a Maui Alotolu for whatever reason. And this is an example of oral history you hear or written history from the wrong source will lead you down the confused path. So I just wanted to kind of share that now that we're talking about Maui and the work that he did and as part of his Loau responsibility and how oral history or the wrong recorded history can make you confused.
That's a lot of things. Hikuleo brought them all the way up to Tonga. And when the Europeans come to the Pacific and claim some of the empire of Tonga, but why they didn't get Tonga? Because the missionary came. The first thing Tupou I asked the God, that's Hikuleo, Mosikoa, to save Tonga. He brought them to Tonga, and Tupou I asked the God to save Tonga.
You know what's funny? There are people online who have the idea. This is the idea to counter that idea. They say, "Oh, Tonga sold out all of Polynesia to the new religion, and that's the only reason why they were never colonized." Right? So they just say, "Oh, we were colonized, but colonized through Christianity." That's one of their arguments, and I usually say, "Oh, if that's the case, then why didn't everyone else do it? If it was that easy, then why is it the rest of Polynesia had Christianity and they still got colonized, right? The other one that some people say is, oh, Tonga had nothing. Tonga had nothing valuable to bring to the table, so they got they weren't interested. And I'm like, number one, you don't know history. Vava'u has the best natural harbor in all the Pacific, and England wanted that. And it's not just the land, it's the ocean. The ocean around, who controls it? And they also just forget that Tonga had a government that they set up. They had a constitution. They had treaties. And then, like you said, the most important thing, they asked the same God who brought them to Tonga to protect them as well. But it's kind of interesting to me that those who don't understand how great of a feat that was for Tonga to remain independent all through this time, they just kind of like, oh, it's not that important. Trust me, you go to any Polynesian, and not any Polynesian, any country that was colonized, they would have loved to be in Tonga's position, right? Just look at the Hawaiians, look at even in Ha'amoa, even in Fiji, everywhere around the world, even the Native Americans in America. They would have loved to have their own government, their own country, to own their land, but none of them were able to achieve it. And so I think that means something, though a lot of people pretend like it's nothing.
That's something people don't realize how important freedom had.
Mm-hmm.
And look, they don't know it themselves because they never
had
free.
it. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but that's true. You don't know what you don't have, right? And they can say, oh, it's nothing. Well, when you don't have it, I guess the best way to say it is, oh, it wasn't important to me anyway. Maybe that's what I do when I tell someone that I'm angry with because they have something I don't have. It's like, oh, I didn't care about it anyway. Oh, Yahweh. Anyways, coming back, I want to have, so this area right here, Lotolangi, that's where Tangaloa Eitu Matupua, the last Tangaloa, resided when Aho'eitu comes to visit him. And Popua is right here. I'm just hovering my mouse in this area. Here, I want to ask you a question, and I want to see what your response is, because this is the people in Ha'amoa say Tangaloa lived in Ha'amoa, right? And that Popua went to Ha'amoa to meet Tangaloa and have a child, and then she came to Tongatapu, and that's where she had Aho'eitu. What is your response to that idea? Because it's a very strong, even many Tongans believe that. And it's a very popular idea with academics, historians, and Polynesians in general. Why don't you believe that idea?
Aho'eitu, there's a reason why Tonga, Tukutonga, Tarikitonga, the settlement.
We're called that, yeah.
Yeah, in our history. And why Hikureo didn't take them to Samoa. Why they direct them all the way up from Waihi to the middle of the ocean. And Hikureo brought them over there, and Tupou I gave Tonga, asked him to protect Tonga. All the names and why Samoa come to Tonga all these years for Katonga Kura and Polo Polo. There is a reason why. They come to Tonga because why they don't have the first king of Polynesia in Samoa?
Well, that's usually one of my like areas that I struggle with in believing that there was an origin of the empire from Ha'amoa. When there has been little to no history, even the oral history, that Ha'amoa were united even within the little islands themselves, right? That there's no oral history that says, oh yeah, Ha'amoa as an independent nation or culture that was unified under one leader for many years. Even their oral history says that never happened, right? Their only response to that is, oh, Tangaloa was so old that we don't have the evidence anymore. And I'm like, at that point, it's just your story against someone else's story. The other thing that I found interesting
In Tangaloa, it's come from father to son.
Yes.
And saints from the Tangaloa to the Tui Tonga, where a lot of Tui Tonga and Tangaloa, their mother from Samoa. And some people try to make their own ideas go to the direct line and story.
Yeah, because here's some of the stories that are made up. Let's say that that's true, right? Because that is well accepted that the Tu'i Tonga consistently married many times, not always, but many times, because the Tu'i Tonga had many wives, right? But many times we'll have a wife from Ha'amoa. Their idea is this: the Tu'i Tonga had to marry to Ha'amoa because that's where Tangaloa is, and that's how they get the bloodline. To tie back the bloodline. That's their idea. That's what they say. You know, that's their reasoning for why the Tu'i Tonga many times had Ha'amoa wife.
Ask them, when a king of a Tu'i from Samoa ran the main king of Polynesia.
Yeah, they never, I mean, that's the thing. Their claim always is Tangaloa, but Tangaloa was so long ago. And I would be like, whenever, that's the consistent. It's the same thing with the Tu'ipulotu Empire. It was so long ago, in my mind, man, it was so long ago that maybe it never existed. Maybe this is an idea that was just developed and they had no evidence. Because here's the other thing, Dad. We've had multiple people from the Niwas reach out to the program, and they say, never ever in our oral history did we say Popua went to Samoa, went to Hamoa. It's just like in our oral history, it was very clear. Popua went to Tongatapu, because that's where Tangaloa resided. So it's funny to me that the people who believe in a Tangaloa in Ha'amoa, they say, oh, our oral history says this, that Popua came to us. And I'm like, but when we go to the Niwas where Popua was from, they said, no, she never went to Ha'amoa. Why would she go to Ha'amoa? She went to Tonga because that's where Tangaloa resided. So I think it's just interesting with a lot of these discussions. So Aho'eitu comes to Lotolangi, to Tapuhia, goes to his father. What are your thoughts on why the story of Aho'eitu and the kava, his brothers killing him, eating him, and then they throw up into the kava bowl, and then he's resurrected? What is the meaning of that story? Or you have any insight as to what that story is supposed to represent? And any thoughts that you have on the Aho'eitu story before we go to the first settlement?
I don't think that's the story. A lot of people, I don't think they eat them. Him. Huh?
Yeah.
They might attack them. But the same thing with how the story, Tangaloa live in Langin, Maui live in Lolo Fonua, Hikure or live in Pulotu. You have to use your brain for the story. Only Jesus was hanged on a cross and he died. is different from anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
When you eat someone, that's it. That's how.
No, and I agree. I think, and do you know who Jordan Peterson is, Dad?
No.
Okay, so he is a professor. He's a professor, well-known professor. He's very famous now. He's Canadian, and he has spent a lot of time studying old stories. And he even studied the Bible, the stories of the Bible. And he says that there's a reason why certain stories stick around for forever, right? And there's a reason why certain stories are described in a specific way. Kind of like what you're saying. It's kind of like that the Tongan term for heriaki. So to describe Aho'eitu's story, it's a long story, right? It could have been like you said, fighting, arguing, whatever. But they make the story short so people can remember, and so they describe certain things in a heriaki way that like you said, you have to use your brain, you have to think about it, right? Obviously, what could eating their brother mean? It could be like you said, they tried to attack him, they tried to treat him inappropriately, whatever. And you have to come up with ways to interpret and understand what the story is trying to say. Because this is a story that is known throughout Polynesia. So it's been around for forever. The question is, why is it written the way it is? I don't know. What I do know is something happened that Tangaloa said, no more Tangaloa. We are now going to have a Tu'i Tonga. Right? Something happened. Do you know anything or have any knowledge or heard any stories on why Tangaloa said no more Tangaloa and we're going to do it Tu'i Tonga now, or based off of Aho'eitu's story? What do you understand from that?
We realize these things. For kava for all, maybe for kava motua. And you think about Hikureo, the voice.
Yeah.
At the Bible, the voice, that's God. And when you think the other way, when we kill pigs and tao and we eat it, that's it. It's gone. But the story, we know that's a real story.
Yeah, something happened. Yeah.
But the problem, we have it because the Samoan bring up something trying to claim they were at the head of Polynesia. No. But why they keep coming to Tonga all these hundreds of years for the Polo and Katoanga Kula, the red. In the Hebrew people, the red is the blood. In Waihi, the king's house, and Tui and high priest, they both, that's Ahau, and they represent the sun. The king of Tonga represents the sun in our history. The Samoan never have, their king never that important. Our king in Tonga was very important, from Tangaloa to Tui Tonga and to both the four, to the Tukutonga, never king of Tonga until Tupou I. When the Tui Tonga end 65 and Tupou I become Tu'i Tonga.
Yeah. And this is something that we never thought of until some of the conversations we had with Masi on the program, Fade, is I think we severely underestimate what Lauhiri Tonga did. And I think this is relevant to Aho'eitu's story because we see a transition happen, right? With Aho'eitu, from Tangaloa to Aho'eitu, there was a transition where the Tangaloa said, okay, no more Tangaloa, we're now going to have a Tu'i Tonga. right? Then with Tupou I, he had a very difficult time to unite Tonga. And it's a very difficult thing. You're under pressure from colonization from outside. You're trying to consolidate and unify a nation within, and you're not even in a kingly line that's the most powerful or the most respected kingly line. You're from the lowest kingly line, right? And there's some things you can win wars, but there's something you cannot get, and that is certain roles and certain titles. It's just like the Tu'i Tonga and the Tangaloa. No matter what Tu'i Tonga does, if there's a Tangaloa, the Tu'i Tonga will never survive. It's just because wherever there's a Tangaloa, that will always outrank a Tu'i Tonga. So I find it interesting that when we go from Tangaloa to Tu'i Tonga, the Tangaloa line ends, right? Or it changes its name. I think the oldest son of the Tangaloa, he becomes Tu'i Perehake, if I remember correctly. So the heir of the Tangaloa line changes his name, even though that's the Tangaloa heir, and the Tu'i Tonga now becomes the head. We fast forward to the change with Tupou I and Lauhiri Tonga. As long as there's a Tu'i Tonga, the Tu'i Kanukupolu is at a very disadvantaged position. Yeah. Because there's nothing that Tu'i Kanukupolu can do. He can go and fight all he wants, but as long as there's a Tu'i Tonga, there's no ability for the Tu'i Kanukupolu to unify. So I find it very, very interesting that you have a kava bowl in Aho'eitu story, right, where the kava is implemented. And what does Lauhiri Tonga, if you can explain to the viewers that the one thing that Lauhiri Tonga gave in the kava ceremony to Tupou I, that to me is very symbolic and is very similar to the story of Aho'eitu, where the kava bowl plays a very important role, in which it seems like Tangaloa is giving something to the Tu'i Tonga that the Tu'i Tonga could not obtain on its own. And the Tu'i Tonga gives the kingly line today something that they couldn't get on their own, which is the Taumafakawa.
Yeah. Even the kava, it's only a liquid from kava. But when he give the power to have a kava, the Tui Tonga, that's it.
Yeah.
There's no way for the Tui Perehake to said, I am the oldest. Eh? Tupou I, he never get the power until the Tui Tonga gave him his kava.
Look at thousands of years. This is what's amazing when we have these conversations, Fale.
Yeah.
A kava ceremony from 3,000 years earlier, or wherever it was, 2,000 years earlier for the first Tu'i Tonga, that's the same ceremony that installs the king today. And it must have been Hikuleo who told Lauhiri Tonga to do this, because it doesn't make any sense. Why would Lauhiri Tonga do this? It doesn't make any sense to me, because when you look at every other island in Polynesia, and Masi was the one who brought this up, what was the weakness? They fought each other. In New Zealand, even in Ha'amoa, was it the Mata'afa and the Marietoa, right? Where they were fighting against each other, and then the Germans came and the Americans came and supported two different guys, split. Same thing in Hawaii, had the same challenges where it was unified against Kamehameha, but then they started to have divisions and they gave too much power to foreigners. But in Tonga was a very different outcome, and it wasn't by war. That's what's amazing to me is Lauhiri Tonga said, in my opinion, he said, it's time for a change, and it's more important to keep our country independent and unified than it is to maintain a title. And he sacrificed the Tu'i Tonga title, just like Tangaloa sacrificed the Tangaloa title. Any thoughts on that kind of relationship that Lauhiri Tonga had with Tupou I?
They settle by themselves. The foreigners is different Tonga from other Pacific Polynesian islands. They war. But Tonga, they settle them by themselves. If the English want to come over and interfere, if they fight, but they settle by themselves, and they did something, come to Tupou affairs, they divide the land by themselves. Not the Parangi come over and give them something new.
Yes. And I think this comes back to how important the Loau structure is. Like when we come back to what we talked about in the beginning here is this is the structure that established the empire from the very beginning, and it's the same structure that they lived for thousands of years that allowed Tonga to stay independent, because everyone had a role and a responsibility, and the two potential leaders said, hey, look, we cannot have two different clans or two different people with two different ideas on how to lead the country. We have to figure this out, like you said. And we can go and fight, but then we both lose. We lose independence. We lose our land. Thousands of years of leadership, thousands of years of people being organized. And I really believe this. Tupou I and Lauhiri Tonga, it was in their DNA. Their ancestors have been leading, organizing, making sacrifices, thinking critically for thousands and thousands of years. It was almost like natural for them to figure this out, like you said, on their own, because any type of conflict between the two of them would give Europe the excuse, oh, we have to come and help these savages, right? Look, they can't get along. They're killing each other. Let's come in and bring order. But I think that's really important to recognize that I think it's the thousands of years of living the Loau structure is what allowed them to settle it without going to war and killing everyone.
Yeah, if the white boys don't have anything to get in for an excuse for them to take over. Our people didn't give them any sense to interfere.
Yeah.
To give them some excuse. That's why we do that.
And what is really impressive to me, Dad, is the ability of Tupou I and Lauhiri Tonga to understand where the real fight was happening. If you come from a very simple way of approaching it, you think, oh, the way to maintain your freedom, the way to get power is to fight, fight, fight. That's like the very, like, what is it? Like, it's like your natural reaction. The animalistic reaction is we go fight. Tupou I and Lauhiri Tonga understood, because of the complexity of the Polynesian Empire, they understood you're not going to win that fight. This fight is a political, this fight is a religious, this fight is a social battle. That's where you need to have the fight, not in the guns and not in the clubs. Because I think it's funny, another thing that people accuse Tupou I and Lauhiri Tonga, that they were wimps, right? They weren't tough. They weren't willing to fight the Palangi and fight them off. And the Samoas and the Maori say, hey, look, we even won some battles against the Palangis. And then I say, hold on, what was the final outcome? What was the final outcome? You may have won the battle, but did you win the war?
The Palangi win.
That's what I'm saying. And yet here they are criticizing Tupou I and Lauhiri Tonga, saying, oh, you guys were scared. You just didn't want to fight. And I'm like, or that's one way to look at it. That's the very basic interpretation. Or you can say, like what we know now, the mind. The mind is more powerful.
Peace is the power.
Yes.
No excuse for the palangi.
Now that we've had that conversation there real quick, I want to open this up. So we have here number 1, Popua, number 2, Tonga, and then number 3 is, I think, is a little island just before you get to Tapuhia or Langi. Why did the term, do we know anything on why the name Tonga was used and why it was called Tu'i Tonga? Do we have any knowledge as to why that was the name that was given to the title to come after the Tangaloa?
The Tu'i Tonga.
Yes.
Because Tonga,
So just as the name of the island.
from the beginning, they know that's south.
Okay.
Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Tonga. And they get it that Tonga Tapu means the sacred of the south.
That was the primary direction for Polynesian navigators. And like you were saying earlier, Tonga Tapu was the furthest south of the Polynesian Empire. So it was basically saying the Tu'i Tonga is the new kingly line that will come through Tonga Tapu that would inherit the Tangaloa. Is that what we're trying to say?
Yeah.
How many Tu'i Tongas lived in Tonga that later became Tukutonga? It was Aho'eitu, and then you said another Tu'i Tonga, or was there more? So I have here your list right here. In the first settlement, you have Aho'eitu, and then Lolo Facangalo.
Yeah. The Tui Tonga second.
Yeah.
Try to forget what they did.
Okay, so that's where that name. So the Lolo Facangalo is the oil that helped them forget what happened, and that is what Aho'eitu's brothers did to him. Is that what you're saying? They tried to forget.
Yeah.
So very interesting. So they took on the name of what they were trying. That's where the name Lolo Facangalo comes from.
Yeah.
Was he the one that moved the settlement from the first settlement from Tukutonga to Tarikitonga?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's Aho'eitu number 1, Lolo Facangalo is number 2, and then the third was Fangaoneone. Was it Lolo Facangalo or Fangaoneone who moved the settlement?
Fangaoneone.
Fangaoneone. Why did Fangaoneone move it? Is there a reason why he moved from Tukutonga to Tarikitonga?
Because it's too small over there.
Because it is a much larger settlement here in number 2. So they moved over there because the more space.
Because Tukutonga,
It's a small,
Tonga, the first place is very small land.
And it's not very good land, right? It's not fertile land. Here on the eastern side, the land is much richer. Over here, because it's so low laying and the water, salt water on both sides, it's not the greatest land in the world to be on. So, okay. Anything else you want to talk about the first settlement here, Fade?
Yeah, when they move it to Tarikitonga, they name a place where they move to. Tarikitonga, that's where Tonga is waiting.
And the name of the first settlement is Tonga.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Tukutonga, when they leave Tonga, Tukutonga, that's the name of today, Tukutonga.
And is this the reason why, like, Ma'ufanga in that area has always been sacred to Tongans? Is it because that's where Aho'eitu first stayed and why they weren't allowed to have wars and battles? Like when you read Mariner's book, like when Uluka'alala comes to Tonga Tapu, he goes to Ma'ufanga, that he knows that in that area, then he's not going to be attacked. No one's going to bother him. Is there any connection to that, to the first settlement, or that's just something else?
No. Tarikitonga, that's where the second one, right?
Yeah.
And they were over there 14 Tui Tonga.
In Tarikitonga?
Yeah, because it's a lot of area.
Okay. Well, I really enjoy having these conversations and really kind of discussing this because I think we have a unique opportunity to look at what happened with the Tu'i Tonga to the Tupou family that's leading now that transition of power. That by observing that, we can get some insights as to maybe what happened with the first Tu'i Tonga in Tangaloa, right? Where we see a transition of power. We see that something changed. We don't seem to know the details. Like you said, that the story is obviously they didn't eat him, because once you eat him, it's done. There's no more coming back from that. But it could be explaining maybe family turmoil, something that happened that basically removed their right of inheritance. And this is not an unusual thing. If we want to look back throughout Israel, the tribe of Benjamin, the youngest tribe, God makes the first king of Israel. Then when it comes to David, David was the youngest of Jesse's sons to become king. You have Jacob and Esau, the younger brother. The younger twin is the one who gets the inheritance. So this is not something that is unusual. It's something that we see everywhere. But I do think there's a lot of value in understanding where these things took place, how they took place, and some of the major events that happened there. Because by studying that and also looking at how Tupou I and Lauhiri Tonga handled that transition of power can be pretty insightful. But that's my closing thoughts. Fade, anything else you want to close us out for the show today?
When you look at what we were talking about, you see how lucky, how people don't realize how lucky we are to grow up in a real peaceful and a real country, freedom from the beginning all the way up for today.
Mm-hmm.
And our people, the Tongan, don't realize that. I can see myself in my situation. I moved to America
Mm-hmm.
for so many years. But see, our first little home in Provo, to lose it, I pay off and lose it because of the tax. I didn't understand you pay off the mortgage and you still have to pay file tax, property tax every year. See, I went to America. I didn't do anything, only get my name on the map here in Tonga.
Mm-hmm.
And after many years, come back, nothing. We still have a home here. But in Provo, our little home in Provo, I didn't pay the tax because I don't understand. That's why I pay off it in the first place. That way I can be free from it. I didn't know I was going to lose it because of the property. Sometimes I think the reason why I pay it off, I don't have to think about it. When I pay off, that's it. It's done. I didn't know.
Uncle Sam always wants more.
You don't free from the bank. That's the world lifestyle. I thought it's the same thing with Tonga. A name on it.
I mean, Uncle Sam will be on your door in America. You pay it off, but he will always tax you.
You always give them money to do what they want.
Yes. No, I agree 100%. Tonga and Tongans should be very proud and have gratitude for the blessings that they have. And then also for Polynesia overall. I think that's something really important. Polynesia, we all should be proud, not just the Tongans, because there was no independent country of Tonga from Samoa and Tahiti and Hawaii. They were all Polynesians, and the fact that the capital of the Polynesian Empire survived to this day, that's something all Polynesians should be proud of.
There was something I never forget. I forget most of the time. The Loau type, it shows over there where we come from, not the Lapita or Austronesian language. The Loau, that's the Waihi civilization.
Yeah.
But sometimes I forgot it. It shows over there the mound building, and Hamonga, the home of Loau, is few places in Tonga still get the name Hamonga. The red ants, that's Hamonga means. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great one. Until next time, peace. Be bold and don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. Mahalo.
Okay.